Hello and welcome to this edition of In Transit. Sitting with me today is Shankar Barua, the Managing Trustee of AEA, which organizes an annual carnival of e-creativity and change agents conclave. Welcome to the show, Shankar.
Hi, Sohela. Thanks
Hi.
for having me.
Boy, we had you last year too.
Yes, indeed.
So that's great. I mean, you've come back, you have yet another festival this year. Tell me, has there been any development since then? Any other progress as far as digital art is concerned? This is about digital art, isn't it?
Yes, to some degree it is about art, but we no longer use the term art.
Okay.
We tend to use the term e-creativity because we've got a much broader focus than just art. And also digital art has sort of lent a bad name to some degree to creative uses of technology, because a lot of it has to do with fascination and infatuation rather than mastery.
I see.
So what we've done is that we draw in engineers, we draw in scientists, we draw in real cutting edge people from across many streams, including amateurs, and try to provide a very broad matrix which includes art, yes indeed, but includes a lot more too.
Interesting. This is quite a mouthful. Carnival of e-creativity and change agents conclave. Could you explain that?
Yes, we tend to encourage everybody to just call it second SAC, that's CEC and CAC. The thing is that there is a history to such events globally,
Right.
insofar as there are many festivals of electronic arts.
Yes.
I've just returned from speaking at the first digital media festival in Valencia. Events like Transmedialia, 25, 27 years old, Ars Electronica is 25, 27 years old. And we are sort of a breakaway from that, going more focused upon the future than the past of what has been done so far. So, like I said, we focus upon a lot more, and we do propose that that is the way to go.
Okay. Could you explain the kind of work that comes into your festival?
Right. Well, to give you an example, one of the primary inputs that we've been having over the last 3 years has been to do with electronic music. Because whereas we've seen almost all of the practices, creative practices, fall into the public domain, I always projected that that music would be the last to fall. However, when it fell into the public domain, as you know from remixes and club music, it was the most brutal, insofar as professional musicians were pretty much wiped out by amateurs, who perhaps in many cases do not even know how to play music. So it was a great relief to find that actually the cutting edge of electronic music itself had moved on, and what is happening at the cutting edge is that there are people who are really pushing the technology. So we've had people like Curtis Ban, who's developed the electronic sitar and electronic dilruba, or rather the extended, they call them the extended sitar and extended dilruba. Ajay Kapoor, who heads the music technology division of CalArts, who was the first to develop an e-sitar, and who this time brought in his incredible Mahadevi bot, which was a robot with a small brain and artificial intelligence that could actually play drums to accompany him. And at the same time, what we did was, since people like these use gestural controllers, which are controllers that you can wear and which read your movements, we also interface these people with Arun Mehta, who uses technology to empower disabled people.
I see.
So there are these cross currents that we bring in, and that's why it goes beyond what people conventionally think of as digital or electronic arts.
I see. So that is the basic difference. When I spoke about digital art, you said, well, you know, we moved away a little from there because there are a lot of amateurs who were involved. It was just as a hobby. Is that what you mean? I mean, there are people who've become much more professional in it, and they're different to people who are amateurs and practicing digital art?
Actually, we've got nothing against amateurs. In fact, it's something that we encourage. Our whole proposition is that technology, the burgeoning spread of technology, which we cannot stop, which is now reaching our villages, which is reaching our small towns all across the world. We propose that this is the potential is to empower creative potential in people, whereas governments and corporations propose these technologies to render people into digital information which can be processed and marshaled, and people rendered into consumers of the products of technology and the soft and hard products of technology. We propose that these technologies actually allow people to be creators themselves, as we see, for example, now with so many young people making films themselves. In the same way, what had happened earlier was that we had seen the first wave of digital art had to do with digital still imaging, and that was something in which everybody could participate because it was so easy. So while it was a good thing that everybody could participate, it was also a bad thing because it gave digital art, broadly speaking, a pretty bad name, insofar as everybody started saying, what is this? You know, it's all just push button stuff, and you know, there's no value, there's no substance, there's no depth, there's no real content in it. So
was it because there wasn't much creativity involved in that, or it was just very slipshod kind of work?
no, it isn't really to do with that. It's just that when practices fall into the public domain, say for example with photography, photography now, with almost any mobile phone that you buy, you get a camera. That means there are more cameras than people actually desire. As a result, what is happening is that there's a lot more photography happening than actually people would really want to do, and far more than there is consumers for. So there is good and bad, and you know, one can say that it's a good thing there's more photography happening, but certainly a lot of that is rubbish. But that doesn't mean that the genre itself is bad.
No, but also a lot of people who probably didn't realize that they could take good photographs, for example.
Certainly.
And they found it's a newfound talent for them. So
Certainly.
wouldn't you say that there's an advantage to it too?
Certainly. This is what I said is our primary proposition, that we encourage people to be seen and to see themselves as potentially creative people. For example, I spent 10 years as a photographer, as an adventure travel photographer, going into obscure places and shooting pictures of people. But I left it in about 1990, 1991, because I realized that those people were going to get cameras and be able to shoot photographs of themselves and tell their own stories. So that we are seeing happen right across the board, and it's a good thing. Yes, there's good, there's bad, and the bottom line is there's lots.
There's lots.
Yes.
You know, the numbers have increased.
Yes.
So has there been any development in your festival from last year? For example, how was this year different? This annual festival, I mean.
Well, to begin with, we've got a huge global sort of acceptance and endorsement. Within India itself, it has been a battle from the beginning, and it continues to be a battle. However, there are institutions like National Institute of Design who have been involved from the beginning and who have deepened their involvement over time, and it's a good thing. There are fantastic professionals also who are involved, but the critical areas in which we move forward is in the acceptability. For example, we do not have the funds to support any participation. So all of our participants, wherever they come from around the world or around the country, have to either support their own participation out of their own pockets, or have to support their participation through institutions and so on and so forth, with which money actually they could go anywhere in the world.
Right.
But they choose to come to us, and we are in a position where, for example, for the 2008 iteration, we were in a position to stop accepting international short creative video works about 6 months before the actual event, because it has become aspirational for some of the best creative practitioners all over the world to participate in this event.
Right. What is India's position vis-a-vis the world where e-creativity is concerned? How is India looked upon as a producer of such art and also a country that holds such festivals?
Well, on the one hand, the reason why we do it, and the reason why I have been working on this line for the last 10 years, is because I perceive that there is a huge innovation gap in India. For example, we produce one of the largest pools of computer science graduates in the world, of almost 375,000 computer science graduates every year. However, in that whole pool, we produce only about 25-30 PhDs, which is an indicator of creative thinking in the field. In the same way, if you look at the recent Innovation Awards, Innovation for India Awards, you will find that the product that was most lauded was actually a treadle pump, which has been in the public domain for dozens of years and was awarded as one of the greatest innovations of 1/6 of humankind of India. in the year 2008. So we propose that technology actually allows everybody to be creative, and as a result we should be able to compete with anybody in the world on any level. However, we do not, and that is because, like I said, the corporates and the governments are promoting that people should become users and consumers and customers rather than creators.
That's a very interesting point. But of course, e-creativity involves making films. Of course, it's technology and films together, art and films together. It does involve filmmaking to a very large extent. Am I right? India, of course, talk about Bollywood. We have a lot of young people aspiring to be directors, a lot of young filmmakers.
Yeah.
Why haven't the numbers of those involved in e-creativity doubled in recent times, considering how interested the average Indian student is in filmmaking?
Well, there is one distortion in Indian society in the creative domain, insofar as, for example, my work is far better recognized in other countries of the world and far better rewarded by other countries of the world. Same is the case with many of the people who are now known as our foremost artists in e-creative lines, such as video making. Now, what happens in the normal case is that if you take a young filmmaker, say for example in India, and say that, okay, your work defines you as an art filmmaker, an art video maker, and this identification comes, say, from a Dutch institution, and the promotion of this artist happens through Holland. What happens is that in the normal course, that artist will start producing for the Holland market, which means he's no longer representing the Indian milieu, and nor is he catering to the Indian milieu. So on the one hand, we're losing such artists. On the other hand, what is happening is that at the aspirational level, people are beginning to think that by claiming that they are video artists or whatever, they seem to believe that they can get away with amateur work, which is not the case. As you know, through history, artists have been expected to be the best in their fields. And so, if we are going to talk about art video has got to be better than television.
Right.
And that is not really happening. There are many issues involved, of course, but one of the issues is that we are not empowering them enough, we are not driving them enough, we are not challenging them enough, and we are not rewarding them enough.
Right. We'll be back after the short break. There's more information about the latest developments in digital art right after this break. Welcome back to In Transit and a chat with Shankar Barua about e-creativity. Shankar, tell me, what kind of films did you get in the festival this year? What kind of work were you offered?
Well, on the one hand, I should tell you that we made a documentary film about the whole festival this year, as we did last year.
Right.
And I'm going to leave that with you to share with your viewers. Beyond that, for the first time, we had a quite substantial section of short creative video works by Indian artists. And we had a massive collection of short creative video works from around the world, ranged from Japan through Moscow, China, the US, Finland, and so on and so forth. It's hard to describe, but some of it is visually somewhat simple activist stuff. Some of it is technologically highly finessed stuff. And some of it is just conceptual stuff. So it's hard to describe. You would have to see a lot of it to understand, because the reason why it is called creative video works is because actually these are people who are pushing the boundaries. In fact, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to leave you one short creative video works for which I made the music. It's called Evocation, and it also gives you an idea of how these things work globally, how we network globally. It was made by a Hungarian artist. There's a dance studio involved, there's a choreographer involved, and without ever meeting, I made the music. And that film has now been all over the world. It's been screened in very many places. We've screened it twice in India. And it's not an example of all sorts of video that we screen, but it is an example of some sorts of videos that we screen.
Right. So what's going on in my mind is that it's mostly people who are very technologically savvy, or maybe are engineers, you know, professionally into the science realm, and you know, mechanical engineering, who are literally sort of playing around with the e-creativity, making films. Is that it?
To some degree, yes and no. Because the thing is that on the one hand, what you will see is that a lot of, in terms of art video, you will find that a lot of the art video work happening around the world is actually happening at the student and young professional level. So at the student and at that level, there's a lot of experimentation going on, number one. And number two, there's a lot of trying to strut their stuff to get work, to get business.
I see.
Right? But also, since they are at that level and since they are a new generation, for example, I belong to the generation which wasn't born to computers, whereas the kids passing out of college today are kids who were born in the world of computers. They're the first generation of computer humans in the computer world. They use technology, they approach technology in a different way. They're very savvy about it. They can do things which are sometimes hard to imagine until you see them. And as a result, what you will find happens in the domain of cutting edge art video is that you will find people developing paradigms which eventually you get to see in cinema.
Right.
Eventually you also get to see, for example, in music video. Those things come from somewhere, and a lot of them come from this territory, at least from the best part of this territory.
Okay, what I was trying to get at is that it's not necessary that the profession of the filmmaker or the person who's making that bit of you know, the creative product should be aligned with what he's making. He could be making a film on anything.
Yes.
Or does it necessarily have to do with his profession? For instance, I took the example of an engineer, a mechanical engineer, for instance.
Yes.
Now, can he make a film on dance, for instance, or music? Or does he have to make a film on a subject that is abstract and something to do with his profession?
See, this is the interesting thing that I was telling you, that what technology is doing is that it's making many creative practices fall into the public domain. So say, for example, I'm not a professional filmmaker.
Right.
However, I have already edited a completely successful full-length documentary film last year, and I have, just as you know, the average video camera owner, I have made a few short films, 3 of which I put up on YouTube. And one of those films within a year has gone up to more than 180,000 viewings, right? So again, to go back to the kind of subject that one deals with, again, to take an example of myself, I used to be a writer, and to some degree I'm still a writer. So when people ask me, what are you a writer on? I said, I'm a writer. I will write on anything. My specialization is writing. So in the same way, you can be a filmmaker without committing yourself to any one subject.
So what it's really done is freed people's imagination.
Yes.
And you know, made them realize their potential.
Yes.
Maybe 20 years ago, you know, there'd be people who'd want to make films or do something in art, but they didn't have the choices. We didn't have those choices in college.
Absolutely.
They have that choice today, and they can go ahead, and they have the technology which is within their means financially.
In fact, it's gone beyond choices. Now they have no choices. Like I said, you buy a phone and you get a camera whether you like it or not.
Okay,
right? You go to school, there's videos anyway. You buy a laptop, it's got a webcam built into it. You know, so it's actually gone beyond choices. These are things that are being thrust upon us. They're being thrust upon society, and people are using them in various ways. Some people do not use them at all. Some people just waste their time using them, and some people make a damn good thing of it.
So they're all tools to e-creativity.
Yes, this is what I speak of as the burgeoning spread of technology that is empowering creativity amongst individuals. However, like I again point out, that is not what is being pushed by corporates and governments, because it is inconvenient for them. Whereas as citizens, as individuals, as people, this is what we need to seize upon, because, for example, in India, we are a country that has not really had any innovations over the last quite a long time. However, now we have the tools. For example, the average laptop computer today is as powerful as the kind of computing that put man on the moon 30, 40 years ago. Right? So what you've got on your desk is something with which you can make a rocket ship, you can make a film, you can make a better rat trap, you can make music, you can do almost anything you can imagine of.
And that's the domain of e-creativity.
Yeah,
Anything under the sun.
And that's why we use the term e-creativity and have abandoned the term electronic arts, because electronic arts was very narrow. Whereas e-creativity, now we are talking about creative practices which we cannot even conceive of today.
Right.
Right? It's going beyond. Say, for example, when I was talking about the gestural controllers of musicians now being transported across to empower disabled people. These are the same tools which, for example, would be used to drive the Mars rover or to do transcontinental long-distance surgery, and so on and so forth. And these tools are available on our desktops. They're extendable very easily. For example, last year there was a gap in regard to the input devices that are available in India. These are of course available elsewhere around the world, but because there's no demand, they're not available in India. So to demonstrate that it did not matter, I actually made one myself, a small electronic circuit, without being an electronic engineer. Because again, the thing is, we also have the knowledge and information. All I had to do was go on the internet, look for the circuits, connect with some people for some advice, and then go into the market in Large Rai market here, pick up the bits and parts, solder it together, and I had a MIDI input device. So in the same way, I could make it a MIDI output device, although I must say that I've got full-tilt professional MIDI input devices too. This was to demonstrate that it could be done. In the same way, with a simple MIDI output device, we could develop the robot, like I spoke of, the robot that plays the drums.
Right. Right. So would you say this is making a person a jack of all trades? I don't want to finish the sentence, but
I wish
saying.
I wish it would. I wish it would, because India is a country which needs innovations of its own.
Right.
Most of our innovations are imported innovations, and they're largely not appropriate to our situation. For example, if you talk about say the automobile revolution, the logical path that is headed towards is a car for almost every household, which is a Western paradigm. But that paradigm is not tenable in India.
Right.
Can you imagine a car for every household? We do not have the space for it. You know, we're at 340, 350 people per square kilometer already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nor is there the fuel, nor is there the this. No. So we have to. That's taking a very in-your-face example. But these examples exist right across the board, where we need to generate our own innovations for our own circumstances, our own situations, our own communities. And with technology today, we have the tools to do so.
Could I say that maybe people will stop specializing in a subject or in a particular thing and spread themselves thin with technology at their doorstep?
I wonder. I would say that.
I mean, a doctor can be an artist today.
Yeah, well, that's a very good example to take, because in this digital media festival in Valencia that I was on in last weekend, that is in fact what I saw. There was a dentist who gave us the most marvelous performance of what he called electric guitar on vibrating table. So yes, it does happen, but the important thing is that engineers need not become filmmakers, and filmmakers need not become engineers. But what is happening is that the tools that they used are becoming available to the average person.
Right.
So the average person can aspire to become an engineer as well as a filmmaker, as well as a this, that and the other, while continuing whatever he does.
And so enrich their lives further.
Absolutely, enrich their lives, and like I said, if they are creative, they can enrich the lives of their communities too. Fascinating,
Shankar. So what's the future in this?
The future is infinite. Like I said, we are dealing, we now use the terminologies which allow us to accommodate new creative practices as they arise, because the thing is that we encounter new creative practices as we go along all the time. Every time we've had our second SAC Carnival, we have encountered things which we have never encountered or imagined before. In the same way, in my trip to Valencia, I encountered things which I had never imagined possible before. Because when you spread creative empowerment across such a massive concept of, you know, almost touching the entire human race, uh, the potential is infinite.
Absolutely. What are you planning for 2009 now?
2009. We're a little bit defocused now because we are looking to establish what we call research and innovation ashrams, which was a concept to take empowerment into the community level around the country and around countries such as India. India. This concept is in fact already being implemented in a modified, not being implemented, but has already been proposed in a modified version for the suburbs of Western Sydney, which again goes back to how I say that my work is not very well recognized in my own country and is better recognized abroad. But this is a concept which takes off from the fact that computers themselves are often not enough. For example, if a motorcycle mechanic were to have access to a computer, he could design perhaps a better, let us say, a carburetor or a better ball bearing. However, to translate that into fact, he needs some computer-based machining.
Right.
So there are other tools, like I was talking about the MIDI controller. There are other tools which also should come in. For example, when we got our first computers, we didn't have printers. You know,
right.
And the computers were completely useless. You know, we'd just play games on them, and you know, whatever we did remained in the computers. So then we got computers. In the same way, then we got sound cards and we started taking music out of them. In the same way, then we got video interfaces and we started taking video out of them. So in that same way, we need other tools to be trickled down into the community so that people can expand the creative potential of the central thrust of technology presently, which has to do with basically only computers.
The possibilities are limitless.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Shankar. It's been very enlightening for me. I'm going back with a lot more information. I must confess, I started off even though we interviewed you last year, I started off with a lot of doubts and questions in my mind. I wasn't very clear about your festival, you know, and how it's developing and what it really entails. Superficial aspects everybody knows about,
Yes.
but you know, to go into the details, what it really means, the essence of it. And I'm fascinated, I must say that. And best of luck in all your endeavors.
Well, thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us in
Right.
the studio.
It's been huge support of you to have me in.
Not at all. You're most
Right.
welcome. Thank you for joining us for this edition of In Transit. We'll be back next week, same time, with another talented guest talking about his work. Till then, goodbye.